Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. We are so glad to have you join us for this particular conversation. I am so delighted to be able to be with two of my very favorite colleagues, Michelle Hughes, Dan Vollrath. You will learn why they're so exciting as you hear them talk. And what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this amazing new book that they have worked together on, and that Michelle is the author finally of it all. And it's a whole book called A Playbook. And the playbook is all about these fabulous ideas that they've come up with in terms of developing and growing habits of mind with students. So, to get started, why don't we let you, Dan, get us started by talking a little bit about what is it about habits of mind that makes you feel so excited and energized by it?
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here today to speak about the book. I think what really makes me excited about the habits of mind is that its impact just in general on not just for students, but also for me as a teacher within the classroom. It's very impactful in the fact that these are skills, behaviors that students learn and I myself use and model in the classroom, which is very, very helpful in working with students. Number two is I think it's awesome that it's a common language. It's a common language within all of us that we all use within the classroom. And then as you go forth with the habits of mind, you learn that it all comes together. So it's not just one separate curriculum. It's all interwoven. And I think right now where we are in the world, why I even have stepped up the game with the habits of mind is that it's so important right now, just due to the fact coming out of COVID, post-COVID, it has made an impact tremendously within my class. And I've noticed it now. I've noticed it before COVID. And, I just keep working with the habits, and I'm just thrilled each and every day when I go into the classroom and talk about them and infuse it into every part of my class.
Well, that sounds like it's really a very rich experience for you with your kids.
Mhm.
And I know that it also kind of looks at it from a secondary perspective. And Dan, there are so many people who feel that secondary kids can't really get into this. But I think you're going to show us how your students do with you.
Yes.
And then, Michelle, I think you've also been, of course, you were middle school principal, so you have middle school experience, but you also have a rich experience with early childhood.
Yeah.
I'm going to just ask you if you can always sort of help us with elementary while Dan kind of focuses a bit more on secondary.
Sure.
And tell us a little bit about why you feel so committed to this.
Well, one of the things that happened when I was a principal of a lower and middle school is that it was a high achieving school, but the school counselor and I were really focused on whether the kids were really thinking deeply about what they were learning, and whether they had the skills and strategies for working through things that come up in their relationships and in the community. And so we started to look for something that wouldn't be an extracurriculum, but would be a way of being. And I found Dan's curriculum on the Habits of Mind online, and that's all she wrote. I was from there. I attended one of his workshops, and then I found my way into the individual practitioner certification. But the thing that I keep coming back to, whether I'm working with children or adults or college students, is the thing that you and Art say all the time, which is that habits of mind make the world a more thoughtful place. And I use those words when I introduce them to the students, whether they're teachers or college students or kids. What is it that you want in life for yourself? And how can these habits of mind, these strategies, these ways of thinking help you to do that? So that's it's been an exciting journey for sure.
And, when we first started thinking about that and said thoughtful, we always thought, Art and I, as we talked about it, we always thought that thoughtful has two really rich meanings. One
Yes.
is full of thought, and the habits of mind are dispositions that are really designed specifically to make you be a more effective thinker. So they're all
Mhm.
about effective thinking, being full of thought. But we also meant thoughtful, meaning sensitive and caring, really knowing that when you're a thoughtful person, you're a sensitive person, you're a caring person, and what a difference it can make if we knew and understood that we can be full of thought, critical, creative, wonderful thought, and at the same time, be paying attention to others, be empathic, being caring, being noticing what other people are doing and how we interact with them. So I think that's a beautiful way for both of you, having joined the crowd and the community of Habits of Mind people. And what I'm going to say is today we're having a conversation, and we're going to invite any of you who are out there and would like to join this conversation to please do. Send us some questions, send us some comments, and we will start to interact with that. This is not a presentation, it's a conversation. And fortunately, you can join us if you would like. So please do. So when we think about that, and it's very interesting, I think one of the first questions that people usually ask is 16 habits, that's so many. How am I going to manage that? So, can you two try to kind of talk about it? I know you created a playbook that sort of helps us to answer that question, but how do you answer the question? How do I choose which one? How do I get started? Maybe you could just give us some conversation on.
Sure. Dan, you want to go first?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. So when I use the habits of mind, lots of times, depending on the class, I think it's very important to know your students, to know the classroom culture, and design the habits around the need within the classroom. 16 is a lot. That is a lot. However, if you space them out throughout the whole year, that could be effective. I always present the habits of mind to my high school students, each and every one to them, at the first week, the first 2 weeks of school. And as the year progresses, as that first month progresses, lots of times it's very important to identify the need, as I stated before, and talk about the needs with the students, and where we need to go, expectations for the class. And then kind of around October, November, because we start school in September here, it's kind of around October, November, it's kind of when we start to implement maybe 4-5 habits of mind. I just feel that all 16 is too many. However, it is important that they know all 16. I always want them to know them. So usually, I start out with 4 or 5 in the beginning of the year, and they are the ones that we use as our expectations for the classroom, our guidelines. But then we also have a lot of journaling as well, where they can also delve into other habits of mind that aren't part of our curriculum in the class. So, for example, if we had persisting, striving for accuracy, managing impulsivity, and thinking flexibly as our 4 for the class, the whole class in general, and part of our expectations and our guidelines, they can step out of that comfort zone in their journaling and write about a different habit of mind, if that makes sense. So we have one for the whole class that we follow. We usually have 4 or 5 for the year. But I always like them to step out of their comfort zone, as I said before, and explore others. It's very important.
So I know, Dan, that when you say that stepping out of your comfort zone, you also do something that helps the kids know whether they're growing with the habits. Would you mind just checking in with that a little bit? Like, what does that look like? I know you have checklists and things like that that sort of help them to keep track of how they're doing.
Yes,
Would you
yes.
talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, so there's a habits awareness checklist. If we could bring that up, if that's available to pop up on screen, wonderful, great. So this checklist is what it does is it allows students to explore habits on their own. So we have our class habits that we follow, class habits of mind and expectations for the year. But then it also allows them to explore on their own. So on this checklist, what students do is they select 4 habits of mind that they're going to work with, on their own throughout the year. And what they do is they list them. So there's 4 of them, and they put how, where, when, and why they use them, if that makes sense. Okay. So they list them out, and then below is a checklist. So on that checklist, it has the habit of mind in the first column. So they put all 4 habits of mind there. And then in the second column is a minus or a plus. So that minus is, okay, I need to really work on this habit. I don't feel that I am, I had been mindful. I had been aware of this habit. And then they write a little comment on the side in the third box. If they put a plus, they do the same, but they explain how it has helped them, how they're mindful of it, where they've used it, how they've used it. So it really allows them to take the habits of mind and be proactive with them, ones of stepping outside their comfort zone. So they know the ones within the class. We all work together on them, but then I like for them to explore 4 others. And lots of times we do the checklist bi-weekly. Sometimes we do it monthly. Sometimes we do it weekly. Again, it all depends on the classroom. But it has been very effective because it allows them to explore more.
That's really very helpful, Dan. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. And I want to encourage people. Hi, Michelle DeBellis, by the way. I see you're out there, and we appreciate your joining us. And anybody, just make a comment. Let us know you're there. If you have any questions for Dan, for Michelle, just put them in the chat, and we'll see if we can take care of that. That's a lovely, interesting way. What Michelle is asking right now, Dan, is she's asking us, how do you help your students with the initial criteria for the selection of which 4? How do they make the decision? Where am I going to step out of the comfort zone?
Oh, okay. Yes, that's actually a great question. So at the beginning of the year, the students receive a list of all 16 habits of mind. So they have the habits of mind list in their binders, on their desk, up in the classroom, so they see them all. That is a very important piece, is making it visual so everybody can see in the class. So in my classroom, I have all 16 habits of mind around the room. I also have a big poster of the habits of mind. So they're everywhere, right? I post them everywhere. And that's very important. So the optics of it is really, really key. So they're able to see them. There are times when there's a moment where, okay, I could use that habit of mine. Although it's not the one for the expectations for the course, I'm still going to bring it up, right? So I go over to the habit, I point it out, and I say, this is what you just did, right? You communicated with clarity and precision. That's awesome. You were clear with your words, how you were, how you were trying to convey your ideas. So that's a way where kids start to see, okay, I'm looking at the habits of mind. I want to try that one. I want to try that one. I want to try that one. I want to try that one because it connects to me in some way. So give them a little bit of time, have them explore the habits and see which ones they want to get, they want to start using is very, very point. That's kind of a pivotal moment in the class is when we do this and they need to understand the criteria of it, right? I explain the chart. I also explain each habit of mine. We have discussions. Discussion is very key within the classroom, where we see them, how we use them. So lots of times it turns into a 15 to 20 minute discussion about the habits, and they talk to partners. They talk with groups about habits that they want to kind of step outside of the box with and kind of get some ideas from their peers as well. So it's really cool. It's a really, it's a very rich discussion. And then that's where they venture out and select their 4.
So we now have, hello, Grace from Buenos Aires, Argentina. We're happy to have you join us. And Allison Zamuda is joining us from India. So we're really an international group today. Isn't that nice? So it's wonderful to see. Allison is saying how wonderful it is to see the three of us together and how the playbook is so practical and approachable. And that'll give you an opportunity, Michelle, to sort of talk a little bit about the checklist that you have with the younger children and how you use that and share that in the playbook.
So one of the things about the playbook, and the reason that it's called a playbook, is because I wanted to be sure to convey that the habits of mind are not a separate curriculum, that they're kind of a way of thinking, a framework for interacting and learning, and building community in the classroom. And a playbook signifies things we can do, concrete things on the ground that we can do in the moment, to advance a conversation, to advance learning, to solve a problem, to grow as a community. So there are 5 different kinds of lessons, but one of them leads up to what Dan does in high school, and that is the class inventories. So maybe, Chrissy, can you bring that up? So one of the things that I did early on in the development of the playbook is to really look at the 16 habits of mind from a developmental point of view. And it really is interesting how the playbook, how the habits of mind can really be looked at developmentally. So in the playbook, the first round of habits of mind that are developmentally appropriate for young children are responding with wonderment and awe, which they do naturally, gathering data through all the senses, and kids are very sensory. They're very aware of what they're seeing, hearing, feeling, touching, but really giving that importance through gathering data from those experiences, remaining open to continuous learning, and questioning and problem posing, which we know they naturally do say, why, what, how come? And so really giving language to this, a common language, as Dan was saying, to the habits of mind, and making this a classroom venture for young children is a great way for them to begin to see what habits I'm good at, what habits I am learning, what habits am I growing as I go through the year. And so the class does this together. And they can do noticing of other people who were practicing a habit. So I noticed that Joey is remaining open to continuous learning when he keeps trying at this activity. So it's not only a reflection for themselves, but a reflection for themselves as a group, and a reflection for themselves and each other. And that builds not only learning, but community. So that's the goal. And then there's a 2nd through 4th list.
Oh, we didn't have the PowerPoint in that.
Okay, that's okay. So there's a 2nd through 4th list that takes this to the next step and asks kids, which habits do they find that they are naturally good at? Which habits do they sometimes use because in certain situations they use them? And which habits they really want to grow and why? And that really leads, if a district is really working on habits of mind and they're using the playbook and then using Dan and my curricula, it moves through developmentally from pre-K through 12th grade.
Where Michelle, this is where you could show the storyboard that you've done.
Sure. Do we have it?
Yeah.
Great. So this is the storyboard that comes with the playbook. And it really talks about which are the habits that apply to each group through a story. And this part of it is the focal point for teachers, which is that, young children come to school with these habits in play, and the habits that we just talked about are the ones that we're focusing on for pre-K through first grade. Can we move the storyboard up?
No, this is just a screenshot.
Okay, very good. So in the second through fourth grade, they have another set of habits of mind that they are working on. And in second through fourth grade, students are likely to be broken into groups so that they can engage with one another in their thinking and their doing. And they're learning social and emotional skills. And so the habits that focus on second and fourth grade have a lot to do with learning how to manage their impulsivity, learning how to question and problem pose, learning how to listen with empathy and understanding, so that when they're in a conversation with people, they're really hearing each other. It continues up through 5th through 12th grade. And we know that the adolescent brain starts to develop in 5th grade, and they're suddenly able to think about their thinking, which is an amazing thing. They can really practice empathy and become active community members, not just recipients of the rules, but also creators of the environment that they're living and working in. And then 7th through 12th grade, they really are ready to look at the whole list as Dan recommends, and then to begin to think about which ones pertain to them, which ones they want to grow. So it is truly a developmental trajectory.
So let's just stop for a moment, because Allison is bringing to our attention beautifully how this really suggests to her, and I think to all of us, the learner-centered way that this is all approaching everything, that we're really looking at this from the way that the kids are really at the center and the developmental stages. I also want to make sure we're not saying that you have to limit yourself to 4 a year. We are saying that you want to be kind of deliberate about your practice with the habits of mind.
Right.
And so you may choose some. And then, as Dan suggested, no matter how young, there are some that kids are just going to naturally want to improve on, grow with, or see other kids doing, and they want to know how they're doing it. So it's all kind of this interactive way of building and developing and growing the habits of mind, some through the deliberate practice that we have as teachers, and some through the kids' deliberate practice of, hey, that's something I really want to get better at. I can see the value of it. And the playbook, you can just notice that it's the Institute has been the sponsor of and publisher of the playbook. And if you would like to see how you can find it, you can get it. It's in the comments section right now. If you look, you'll see that there's the link to our little shop on our website, and you can get the playbook for yourselves if you need it and want it, which hopefully you do. So as Michelle was just talking and describing that developmental idea there, I thought maybe this is a nice way for us to carry one, as Dan, I think you were the person who said it's kind of like a train that goes all the way through from kindergarten straight out into life. Can you get us started? I think you two were talking a little bit about maybe gathering data with all senses was a way to show how do you move that train from early to high school. So why don't we, as people always like to do it, work backwards to get to where we're going.
Great.
Okay, start with it, Dan. Get us started on the train. Or I guess maybe should we do it the other way?
Yeah.
Michelle, you want to start us on the train?
Sure. So, one of the things that that a teacher and I were just recently sort of brainstorming about how she's going to bring habits of mind into the classroom this year. And one of the things we talked about, because she works with this span of ages, is that young children might not really grasp managing impulsivity so well. They're sort of wired for impulsivity. But if we give them the tool of gathering data through all the senses, we're preparing them to stop, to look, to listen, to pay attention to what they're feeling, to build situational awareness so that at the next developmental level, they can begin to use that as a tool for managing impulsivity. So there's this nice trajectory that happens between a few of these habits of mind, and that's one developmental trajectory that is really helpful. And we got very excited about discovering that, and she's going to be using it. So that's an example.
Okay, take us on the train, Dan. Where do we go from there?
So if that's a really good start. And then as the train travels all the way up to high school, right, there's the, in between where the habits of mind come into play, and they get more involved, more advanced, more higher level thinking. A great example would be a student of mine a few years ago. And I actually wrote about it in an art. Well, I didn't give this example, but there's an Edutopia blog that I wrote on gathering data through all senses. One of the last strategies, if we have it, do we have it on there or no?
I think it's going into the comments or in the resources, and it will also be on our website.
Great.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So the gathering data through all senses, when, once that train goes and it goes all the way up and we're at high school, the idea is bringing it together for more higher level thinking, more complex activities that students are working with in school. The rigor is higher, and what these habits do is they help students at being successful. So one example would be, I had a student a few years ago who had trouble with presenting information in the classroom, standing up in front of the classroom, giving a presentation. So one of the strategies I used was gathering data through all senses. So before we stand up and before we talk in front of a large audience, right? Large audience, maybe 20 to 25 students in a classroom. Yes, that can be daunting. And, her and I had this discussion. So I said, let's gather data through all senses. Now, she did know gathering data through all senses, but we took it to a higher level, as stating. So before she presents, she goes out in the hallway and she takes 5 minutes to gather data through all senses, where she takes time to breathe, to look around, to kind of take a mental vacation, a mental senses vacation. And that's actually described in the Edutopia article. So take a minute, breathe, take 30 seconds, look around, find something, something happy, something that excites you. Listen to some calming sounds, whether that be music. So the idea is to use those senses and then step into the classroom and present. And as she practiced this, I could tell that her presentation skills were improving tremendously. And it was just from the idea of gathering data through all senses, taking those senses and using them. And I think this is important because I remember expressing this with the student. Be intentional with it and be purposeful. And she got it. And it was really, really cool. And what was even more exciting to see was a few years later, she came to me for a letter of recommendation. And I think this is where it gets to the point where that train goes from early elementary all the way up to the end of school, by the time they graduate. So she came to me for a letter of recommendation. And I said, I remember what we did with gathering data through all senses. I remember you presenting and you being very effective at the end of the year. And, your success showed. So we talked about that. So I said, what I would like you to do is I would like you to write your letter of recommendation. And in the letter of recommendation, I would like you to tell me how, or describe to me how 3 habits of mine helped you within your years in high school. And she did. She listed 3 habits of mine. One of them was gathering data through all senses. So I took that information, and then I took her letter of recommendation about herself and put it into my creation. And I took her description of how she improved with the habits of mind, gathering data through all senses, how that helped her with presenting. One was managing impulsivity, and the last one was thinking and communicating with clarity and precision. And she wrote about them, and I brought them into a letter of recommendation, which is really, really neat, because that's kind of like the cultivating, the cultivating piece of high school. But then we had that discussion at the end after I gave her letter of recommendation, and I said, now how can we use them once we graduate? And I know till this day, we email back and forth, and she still uses them. So that's pretty cool. That's one really neat example and experience to where I'm like, you know what? Not only do they work within the school, they work outside of school, like beyond high school. And I've had a lot of students actually come to me and say they're mindful of them, they're aware, they've improved their behaviors. So it works. It really does work. And you know what? It makes sense. It's common sense. Like it's there. And that's what we need to do in life. And that's why I feel the habits of mind from, early elementary all the way up to the end of school is so critical.
Maybe we could say to the end of life, huh, Dan?
Yeah. Because it's like beyond high school all the way through life. So yeah.
Now, I just want to let everybody know that the link to your Edutopia article is in the comments now.
Great.
And also, Allison has put in that overwhelm requires a timeout and a reset. That's a way cool idea. Yeah. I love the way she said it. I needed to have a mental senses vacation. My goodness, I think I need that very often these days.
Yes.
Too much out there. I need a little mental health requirement would be that my mental senses vacation is when I get more mindful. I get more meditative. Yeah. I listen to what goes on inside as much as what's going on outside. Yeah. All really beautiful as you described this student and her self-discovery, what she learned about herself and what she carries forward. That's all beautiful. Right. So let's just talk now to kind of get ourselves moving toward where we would close out this conversation. That would be that I'd love you to talk a little bit about the idea of what you mean by streamlining, what you mean by playbook, like that whole kind of way that you're conceptualizing this journey. And I think, Michelle, if you could get us started with that.
Sure. So, one of the great experiences I've had as an adult learner was participating in Allison and Heidi's workshop in the summer, a couple summers ago, in storyboarding and streamlining the curriculum. And I began to think about streamlining in a whole other way than I had ever really thought about it before. And what I mean by streamlining is there are so many ways to approach the habits of mind. And there are 16 habits of mind, and it can all feel quite overwhelming. And the idea in the playbook was to bring it all down to developmental and discipline-based choices, to think about the 3 levels that Dan talked about, the academic, the personal, and the community, and how the habits of mind play out at each of those levels. And to really kind of think through who the kid is in front of you and how you're going to think about the habits that make most sense to focus on. So it naturally would make more sense to focus on questioning and posing problems for young children than it does to think about thinking about your thinking. Whereas when they get into middle school and they're really capable of doing that, that's a great time to do that. in science, it might make more sense to strive for accuracy. And in art, it makes a lot of sense to focus on creating, imagining, and innovating. That's not limiting, but it's an example of how we can begin to streamline our approach to how we bring the habits into the classroom. So that's one piece. And the second piece is the playbook itself, which takes all the possible modes of learning in the classroom, brings them down to 5 ways of thinking and learning. And that is sociometries, where the kids are up and around and choosing stations to be at based on their own experience, to journaling, to station work and lab work, where we're setting them out into their independent work with some kinds of suggestions for the habits that they might want to practice as they're out there circulating around the room doing activities. To the literature that we read and how we can pull the habits out of character development and plot and help the kids to see more deeply into the text that they're reading because they are thinking about the habits that are at play. And so that's what the playbook does, is it really looks at what do we do in the classroom? How can we infuse the classroom with habits of mind without adding an additional curriculum, but integrating it and embedding it in what is happening in the room?
And let's just get clear, because I want to make sure that we say that if you're interested in this concept of storyboarding and streamlining, I think
Yes.
you probably know that there's a beautiful new book out by Heidi Hayes Jacobs and Allison Zamuda. And in addition, there's a great website with lots of examples. So we have one rich one in our playbook, and then there are many that you can see otherwise. So I just want to give a shout out to that. And now, Dan, why don't you take us again to kind of bringing this to closure by just talking a little bit about where you see all of this going and where you see the future of this work. I know you're doing a book right now in which you're really looking at how all of this is building the capacity of students. What's special also about what you're doing is that you are actually a special education teacher who has really brought this to students with very particular and important needs. And I just wanted you to kind of bring us to closure with this.
Yes, absolutely. When I look at the playbook, I think one way to explain it, especially to the high school level, is that, and I mean, not even the high school level, just in general, the playbook is like it's like a football playbook, right? We have routes we run, we have plays we run, things we do in order to win the game. Well, this one's a playbook for life, right? When you step outside of the classroom, it's very, very important that that you're aware not only of your surroundings, but yourself and what you need to do in order to be successful, in order to be mentally and physically well, and things you can do to just better your all-around self and others. Listening to what others have to say in the world around you, being clear with your words. So, thinking and communicating with clarity and precision. So these habits come into play, and I think the playbook is great. And I think a great analogy is the idea of a football playbook. So that's the way I explain it to people.
Yeah.
How important that is. I think that's a great analogy.
I think it's apt.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Well, we're looking forward to all of you opening the playbook for this year with your students in the classroom. And your playbook can be your own, or you can certainly join the one with all the commentary that we have. But make yourselves a little playlist and think about which of the habits will you introduce? Which ones would be most important with your students this year? How might you begin to see a little bit more about it? We invite you to send us your ideas, and welcome to this new year of wonderful growing and learning together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.